Hey everyone, I'm Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Australia Institute, and welcome to today's webinar. Thanks so much for joining us for delivering healthcare in Gaza. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which I live and work, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and pay my respects to elders past and present. And I also want to welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today on the webinar. Today's webinar is free and open to the public. And just a reminder, you can find our other upcoming webinars at australiainstitute.org.au. I've got a couple of quick tips for people who haven't used Zoom before, just in case. You can type questions in for our panelists today using the Q&A box. You can also upvote other people's questions as well. Reminder to please keep things civil and on topic in the chat, or we'll remove you. We will not tolerate any racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, or trolling. Finally, a reminder that this discussion is a live event and it is being recorded. The video will be available on the Australia Institute's website later today, as well as on our YouTube page. So the fragile ceasefire in Gaza has already been breached. And today we're going to be talking obviously about the situation in Gaza over the past few years. On October the 7th, Hamas attacked and killed approximately 1,200 people in Israel, of whom at least 800 were civilians. Over 250 people were abducted and taken to Gaza as hostages. And following that attack, Israel unleashed a brutal military response in Gaza, something we have all witnessed on social media. UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory recently found Israel has committed genocide against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, reinforcing what Palestinians, genocide scholars, and many humanitarian organisations had been saying for months. Israel has killed at least 67,000 people in Gaza. Most people expect that to be a wild underestimate. Most of them civilians, including over 18,000 children, according to the Ministry of Health. UNRWA reports that on average, 100 people are reported killed every day in Gaza due to the Israeli military operation or shootings at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation food points. UNICEF reports that homes and vital infrastructure have been devastated, with over 1.9 million people, about 90% of Gaza's population, internally displaced, many living in overcrowded shelters or makeshift tents with extremely limited access to water, sanitation, and hygiene. Famine was officially declared in Gaza City and surrounding areas back in August, including impacting over 300,000 children under 5 who are at risk of acute malnutrition. According to the Ministry of Health of the State of Palestine, at least 1,500 health workers have been killed in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023. And here in Australia, an event discussing the effect of war on children, due to be held at the Melbourne Royal Children's Hospital, was recently cancelled. And The Guardian broke the news that a similar event had been cancelled at the Fiona Stanley Hospital in Western Australia as well. So we reached out to Fiona Stanley to see if we could facilitate an event focused on the challenges of delivering healthcare in Gaza. And we're really grateful that Fiona Stanley could join us today alongside our other guest speakers. I'm very proud to introduce Professor Fiona Stanley, AC, named Australian of the Year in 2003. She's a vocal advocate of the needs of children and their families. And she's the patron and founding director of the Telethon Kids Institute, established in Perth in 1990. And she's also the UNICEF Australia Ambassador for Early Childhood Development. We're also joined today by Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, or Dr. Mo, who's an English-Australian emergency physician of Palestinian heritage, whose courageous humanitarian work has brought critical attention to the healthcare crisis in conflict zones. From a Palestinian refugee family, Dr. Mo pursued medical training across Britain and Australia, embodying a lifelong commitment to human rights, care for the world's most marginalised, and he has been on the ground in Gaza. He's got on a mission to bring a children's hospital to Gaza. And in 2024 and 2025, Dr. Mo served in Gaza in Gaza's NASA and European hospitals, with Rama Worldwide providing critical emergency care amid the escalating violence. And finally, we're joined by Dr. Sue Wareham, who has spoken and written widely on peace and disarmament issues, including the impact of armed conflict on civilians and on the environment. She's the president of the Medical Association for the Prevention of War and Secretary of Australians for War Powers Reform. She's also a past board member of ICAN, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, which won the Nobel Peace Prize. And Dr. Wareham is a former GP in Canberra. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're so grateful that you could join us. Just a reminder to everybody watching, we will take questions from the audience in the second half of this webinar. And we'll start with a discussion now. Dr. Mo, I wondered if I could come to you first, please.
Yeah.
I know you've been on the ground in Gaza. It must have been an horrific experience. What was that like as someone trying to deliver healthcare in such desperate circumstances?
Do you know, going into Gaza, you see the images on your TV screens and you already know it's going to be difficult. But when you're there, it becomes very confronting because, when we have a mass casualty event, there's no triage. There is no security at the hospitals. So everybody is flooding in all at the same time, including families. And some of these family members are bringing in their children who are burnt head to toe with no painkillers, no analgesia. And that's not the only child that's injured. There are many families that are coming in with injured children, injured mothers and fathers. And sometimes it's only a child that's coming in carrying their other child sibling because their parents have been killed. And because there's no triage, you are looking across in this emergency department and you have all of these patients and you don't know who you're going to see first. And the decision making doesn't even become about who potentially, who's in most need. It's actually who can you actually save? And, if there is a child or if there is a man that has half their intestines hanging out and they're bleeding from their limb, we just don't have the resources or the manpower to treat that person, especially if there's a mass casualty event. So most of the time we would leave those people to one side while we would try and deal with people that we could keep alive. And then on top of this as well, you've got to understand that because healthcare workers have been targeted in Gaza, many of them have been imprisoned or killed, we are very short-staffed and we're dealing with complex traumas with low resources, and half the staff are working 24-hour shifts. So this could be 20 hours into their 24-hour shift. They're exhausted. Also, they're starving as well. Many of them haven't eaten in 2 or 3 days. And some of them are ill as well. The first time I went to Gaza in June 2024, about 50% of the doctors and nurses that I worked with had jaundice from hepatitis A from dirty drinking water. So it was extremely confronting work environment. And while all of this is happening, so you have exhausted, tired, sick, and sometimes even injured staff who have got shrapnel injuries that they've had to bandage up and continue working. They've lost family members. And then you've also got low-resourced environment as well. And then on top of that as well, you've got some very horrific injuries and you've got nothing to treat these injuries. So we are trying to make best of a very difficult situation. And what ends up happening is you end up treating what you see in front of you and kind of blocking out the noise, because when you're treating patients, family members will start grabbing you and start shouting, and they want you to see their child, or they want you to see their mother or their father or their brother or their sister. And that can become quite scary, especially if you are, not 6'2", 18 stone, muscular man like me. That can be very, very confronting because you are not deciding not to help them. You are just trying to do what you can. And what you can do is very limited. And you do let a lot of people down. That's how I felt when I was there. And it's very, very difficult. Gaza is a very difficult place to be a doctor, and it's a very, very difficult place to be an emergency physician. And in the backdrop of all of this happening, sometimes we have patients that come in who are family members of the doctors and nurses. That's happened numerous times when I was there, where when we open up the blankets, and we have a look inside the blankets, and it turns out to be the mother, the child of one of the doctors and nurses. And then you're dealing with one of your staff members who is breaking down and crying. And then on top of all of this, while this is going on, the hospital and the inner and the area around the hospital is being bombed. And there was numerous times when it was being bombed, the walls of the hospital would shake, and sometimes the roof tiles would fall. And we were extremely worried that we were about to be bombed in the hospital. And the only thing really that we could do was to continue working. And the reason for that was because when I would look around and I would expect to see panic from the other doctors and nurses that I was working with and the patients, everyone was calm and everyone just continued working. And that's what calmed me down to continue working as well, and try my best to help as many people as possible. But like I say, there are so many layers to how complicated this ethical issue is. You know, who do you treat? Do you treat a person who is young because they're young and you could save them and you give them the resources? And do you leave the older person who, even if they were to survive their injury, because of the lack of wheelchairs, because of the lack of food, because of the lack of resources, because of the lack of rehabilitation, they probably won't survive much longer? Or do you help the healthiest and leave the most vulnerable, like the children, and help the healthiest because they have the best chance of survival? And these are a lot of decisions that you make while you're in Gaza, and a lot of the time you're making them up on the spot. And retrospectively, you could look back at this, and you could be very regretful about the decisions that you made. But I think we have to bear in mind that the healthcare system in Gaza hasn't just collapsed on its own. The healthcare system in Gaza has been systematically destroyed. Doctors have been systematically targeted, including their families. And um, this has never been done on this level before. We've never seen anything like this. And I've worked with many doctors while I was there in Gaza who have worked for the United Nations, who've worked during Iraq War, Syrian War, who've worked in all kinds of these war zones. And all of them have said the same thing to me, which is nothing ever compares to Gaza. We're talking about mass casualty events. You then have the trauma of when you are not having mass casualty events, but you have a child that's brought in that's being shot in the head by a sniper. You have prisoners that have been detained by Israel, tortured for many months at a time, and then released in their underwear, still cuffed, and they come to your hospital with infectious diseases, skin infections, malnutrition, and various signs of internal injuries. The cohort of patients that we see is so large. And I think one of the things that really shocked me when I was there, and this is something that you maybe don't see or you talk about very often, or doctors don't talk about it very often, but is the mental health issues that we see in Gaza. There are many times that we come in and people are catatonic, they do not move, they are frozen still because they are in shock. And sometimes they're in shock because they've just seen their child being blown up in front of them, or their mother being blown up in front of them, um, or their children burnt alive in front of them, screaming. And they come back into the hospital repeatedly over and over again, in catatonic states, sometimes screaming and in shock. And because we don't even have benzodiazepines or any sedatives, we literally are holding these people down as they are screaming and reliving the horrors that they've endured while in Gaza. And I think this is what speaks out to the healthcare crisis in Gaza, which is the healthcare crisis is not just the physical, which we've all seen with headless children, burns, limbs missing, skulls that have been crushed from collapsed buildings. What we also see is we see a whole generation that has been traumatized, that has now got severe levels of PTSD, anxiety. And even when I was there, I remember leaving Gaza and not being able to sleep without the sound of drones overhead, that buzzing sound. As confronting as it was almost a comfort, because when you know that there is a drone overhead, there's less likely to be an airstrike, because the drone is doing reconnaissance. It's when the sound of the drone goes silent is when you know something might come and bomb you then. And even children in Gaza know the sounds of what an F-35 sounds like when it's laden with bombs and what it sounds like when it's released its payload. So they run when they hear the sound that it's still not released its payload, and they continue playing in the streets when they hear the sound, knowing that it's already released its payload. And these are the kind of traumas that we could never really document properly, just how widespread the trauma is in Gaza and is in the children of Gaza.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mo, for sharing that with us. I can't even imagine just how distressing it is repeating that, let alone living through it. And I'm sure that must be really difficult to talk about, but it's so important to know what that experience is like on the ground. So we really do appreciate you sharing that. We've got a video from Dr. Mo that will play in a little bit, but just picking up what Dr. Mo was mentioning there about the impact on children in particular. Fiona, Stanley, if I can come to you next. Obviously, this has been a devastating conflict for children in particular. What can you tell us about those impacts specifically?
Well, I've just been sent the UNICEF report about Gaza and the issues there. I do hope I can get through this without weeping, because the statistics are awful. Mo, you are an absolute amazing person to have gone through what you've gone through. We think nearly 20,000 children have been killed. 56,000 children have been reportedly lost one or both parents. That's of September this year, and 42,000 children have been injured, and the life-changing injuries are devastating for these children. Then, of course, there's the malnutrition, the fact that virtually 600,000 children have not been to school for nearly 2 years. The 95% of households don't have fresh water, and 100% of Gaza's children require some kind of mental health support, as Mo said. I mean, not one of these children is going to be unaffected by the trauma that they have been through, by the genocidal trauma. And so for me, this is one of the biggest child impacts that we've seen ever. And I think that's what's so anguishing for us. And I think that, I mean, we know that some of the children have been evacuated, some of the children with the most severe injuries have been evacuated, but that's an urgent thing to do straight away. But they need to be evacuated as families so they don't get so much more separation. I could go on, but I know I'm going to be talking about the public health aspects in a minute. So I will leave it at that. I think this is devastating for the families and the children of Gaza.
Dr. Sue Wareham, is there anything that you would like to add to that, in particular the impacts on children?
Thanks, Ebony, and to Dr. Mo, and I can only add my comment about the real heroes when the story of this is eventually told, perhaps with some truth in our mainstream media. It's going to be the healthcare workers who are the heroes. I'm sorry, my voice is shaking already. The healthcare workers, the journalists, also those who have stuck it out, and those who have stuck by the people of Gaza. We can't express our thanks and our deep respect for what you've done. Just to add a comment on the impacts of warfare generally on children. Children are generally the most vulnerable people in any community in times of war, and this is particularly so in the case of Gaza. The UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food, who was commenting on the situation in Gaza, but more generally stated in recent times that conflict is the main cause of hunger in the world, and that the people who suffer the most are always the children. That was in relation to hunger, and particularly because children are growing and their nutritional needs are unique. I'm just going to, sorry to digress a moment, but just to broaden this beyond Gaza and the immediate time, some of the other impacts of warfare on children, the environmental impacts. Look at what's left of the natural environment in Gaza. This is what children of Gaza have ahead for their lifetimes, the environmental impacts, the greenhouse gas emissions from what's happening in Gaza, aggravating climate change, which is already a dark shadow over the future of our children. I think I'll stop there because there's so much else we want to talk about. I'll leave it there for the moment. Thanks, Ebony.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Mo, I want to come back to you if I can about specifically the comments that you were making around the impact on healthcare workers and the fact that hospitals have been targeted and bombed, and that is not something that other healthcare workers are necessarily encountering in other conflicts. Can you share a bit more about that experience and how that impacts your ability, I guess, to even deliver healthcare?
Well, healthcare workers in Gaza, I think they make up something like 0.7% of the population, yet they make up about 8% of the dead. And that is statistically impossible unless they were specifically being targeted. You can't be getting killed 10 times more than your average population size unless you're being targeted. And there is a real fear in the air in hospitals when doctors are leaving work and going to and from because they are being targeted. And sometimes even when you're at work, when I was there in Gaza, we had those paramedics who were executed and buried in shallow pits. That happened while I was there, and we recovered their bodies while I was there in Gaza. I was also there in Gaza when they bombed the surgical unit of Nasser Hospital, killing doctors and patients on the operating table. I was also there when they completely blew up and destroyed the Turkish Cancer Hospital as well. And as a healthcare professional as a foreign healthcare professional going in, when we were there, we also encountered a foreign healthcare professional. I think it was an Egyptian who was killed as well while we were in Gaza. So there's this added strain while you're there in Gaza, knowing that you are a target, even as an international aid worker, because you are a doctor, you are a target. And that is felt the moment that you are beginning to enter into the crossings into occupied Palestine, where you are searched, your bags are opened, baby formula is taken out, medicines are taken out of your bag. And, if you're caught with too many things in your bag, like medicine, as a doctor, they sometimes might ban the whole mission from going ahead. So you are essentially, from the moment that you enter into occupied Palestine, you are being told that what you're doing is wrong, and they are trying to catch you giving any kind of substantial healthcare. And one of the reasons why I recorded and documented what I witnessed in Gaza was because I felt so helpless as a doctor that I could do one part of my Hippocratic Oath, which was to bear witness and to tell the stories of what has been going on in Gaza and the healthcare crisis in Gaza. So that was the least that I felt that I could do while I was there in Gaza, because, like I said, everybody in Gaza, every healthcare professional in Gaza has a target on their back. And that is statistically backed up. It's backed up in the rhetoric that we hear and, from Israeli ministers. And it's also backed by the, blatant double strike that we saw a few weeks ago at Nasser Hospital. This happens so regularly in Gaza that, you go into work and most people are okay with the fact that they might not make it home from work. That was something that was always on the forefront of all the healthcare workers' minds, that this might be our last shift.
Fiona, Dr. Mo there has obviously talked about healthcare professionals not only being targeted, but the impacts on the actual healthcare facilities themselves. Obviously, in any war zone, there's going to be a lack of medical equipment and medicines, and there's always challenges. But as a public health expert, thinking about those aspects in particular, what are some of the challenges that healthcare workers are facing there to deliver healthcare in conflict zones or in Gaza in particular?
Well, I think this is what I want to do now, is get onto the public health thing so I can stop thinking about the kinds of things that Mo's talked about. So I'm going to try and be the practical. What you have to do is think about what the public health priorities are for this situation, and they're absolutely urgent to have now, and that's water. A high proportion of the people in Gaza haven't got access to clean water. I mean, Mo's already talked about the hepatitis from drinking contaminated water in the staff, but that is absolutely key. And the other big one, of course, is food and nutrition, not just to get the children who've got malnutrition and give them specific nutritional additives, but just basic food for everybody to try and prevent the rest of the population having malnutrition. They've probably all got malnutrition of some kind because the food is going to be of such poor quality. And then, of course, the other thing is shelter. So these basic aspects of public health, water, food, shelter. UNICEF went in, of course, and got the polio vaccinations up, but that's the other thing, is vaccinating kids more urgent than ever because of the situation in which they have with the contaminated environments that they're in, with a high risk of infections. The important thing, I think, is to get those injured children out, particularly the seriously injured children, and evacuate them to care places, because that will relieve the people in Gaza of having to treat these most severe children, and they have to go, as I said, with their families. And a little bit later, we have to think about all of the social and educational and the play aspects and the mental health aspects and the child protection aspects that are really, really vital to ensure that this population starts to be able to exist again as a functioning social set of social units. And I think that the aspects about play and education, and not just because these kids haven't been to school or haven't had a chance to be at playgroup or whatever, these are actually mental health interventions now. They're the kinds of things that children will be able to think about something else other than whether they've lost their mother or father or their family. And so that trauma managed educational and play environments are absolutely key as a public health intervention now, in my opinion. There's also the thing that's been going through my mind a lot through this whole 2 years has been the particularly vulnerable children. And I was thinking, what would I do if I had a child with cerebral palsy in Gaza? How would I look after this child, or a child with intellectual disabilities? You see some of the people moving from one place to another, and they're moving them in wheelchairs and on carts because they can't walk. So those particularly vulnerable children is another urgent way that we need to support those children. I note that one of the Israelis said that, that child didn't die of malnutrition. It died because it had cerebral palsy. Kids with cerebral palsy don't die unless they've got malnourishment or some other problem. These kids do very well in situations where they're well cared for. So I'm absolutely with UNICEF and the Red Cross doing the kinds of things they're doing. We need to fundraise for them so that what we can do as Australians feeling desperate about not being able to be there on the ground with people like Dr. Mo. As I said on Late Night Live the other night, if I were 40 years younger and I'd be in Médecins Sans Frontières or going in as Dr. Mo's assistant, though I'd be hopeless, of course. But, but we need to support the people who are going to be able to get in there now and do the work. So supporting UNICEF and Red Cross is absolutely vital. But the other thing that the UNICEF are doing, of course, is, and that's going to become more urgent, is what they call winterization. So these people are living in situations where winter's coming to this part of the world, and they won't be able to, where are the blankets and the tarpaulins and the tents to support these families so they can actually live in these more cold conditions. So I think all of these aspects are really absolutely important for us to think about, as well as I said, the mental health stuff and the social protection of kids, and that trauma management. It's a huge issue. UNICEF, United Nations, have put out a report that it's going to cost $70 billion to rebuild and make Gaza safe again. It's only 41 kilometres long and 5 kilometres wide. 84% of it has been destroyed, and in Gaza City, 92% has been destroyed. So they're going to clear the hospitals and other places of debris to try and make them more functional. I mean, they'll be dead under the rubble. There'll be more trauma there. So it's really, really incredibly important that we support the all of the different aid activities that are going into Gaza now. Sorry to be so emotional. I'm sorry.
No, totally understandable. I wonder
Ebony,
if I
could
can. Yeah,
could I
please.
just add
Go,
a comment to what Fiona has said? And just to point out a paradox, which I'm sure we're all aware of, but I think it bears repeating. If this were happening in Australia, to any children in Australia, healthcare workers who are aware of what these children are being exposed to would be subject to mandatory reporting. This would have to be reported to authorities so that action could be taken to prevent such harm being done to these children. And yet policies which our own government has been complicit in are responsible for the devastating and long-lasting harm which is being done to these children. And that important paradox, I think, is, I mean, it's just got racism written all over it. How can we allow this to be happening to Palestinian children? And yet in Australia, there would be rightly absolute outrage if this were happening to a child in Australia.
Absolutely. Fiona, I wanted to ask you, we reached out to you because we saw that story about the event being cancelled at the hospital named in your honour. I know medical professionals have felt a great duty of responsibility to kind of talk about what's happening in Gaza. Can you just tell us about when you found out about what had happened at the Fiona Stanley Hospital?
Yes, well, this is where I met Dr. Mo. So he and a group of other doctors came to my house and told me about the situation, which I had not been aware of, about the cancellation of a grand rounds, as we call them, at the Fiona Stanley Hospital last November. But it was the way in which it was done, which I found so awful, that they had actually, the people from the hospital had heard Dr. Mo and another Palestinian give a talk at the State Library and were so impressed with it, they invited them to give a grand rounds. Mo, please interrupt me if I'm getting things wrong here, but this was the understanding. And then there were a series of emails that were sent to Dr. Mo over the next week or so before the event, starting to truncate his ability to actually say what he wanted to say. You know, that you weren't allowed to wear anything that made you look Palestinian. You had to wear scrubs. You weren't allowed to show any photos or images of children being damaged in Gaza. You weren't allowed to mention the Israeli Defense Force. You weren't allowed to mention things that were going to upset people. And then I was told when I contacted the hospital, I was told that the reason that it was pulled and it was stopped was because it was going to upset staff and they wouldn't be able to do their jobs in the hospital after the event. And then in the end, it wasn't actually going to be a presentation by Dr. Mo. It was going to be a Q&A. And here are the list of questions, none of which related to Gaza. And then 10 minutes before the grand rounds was due to start, they pulled it. So I was devastated because one of the reasons why, and Sue and I have been working with a whole lot of other doctors trying to get these issues into the media over the last 2 years, but we believe that, you know, we're actually quite a powerful group of people, we doctors. We're highly regarded, mostly. We've got good evidence. We're powerful in influencing the population. And I feel we're being targeted to silence us, to stop us getting this out into the Australian population about the devastation of what's happening, and to make Australia more active in its support for the people of Gaza. As Sue has said, it's extreme racism in our view. So I feel, and I think the same with the Children's Hospital in Melbourne, who pulled their children in war presentation a couple of weeks ago. Are people frightened? Are the Israeli people frightened that we are going to be very powerful in putting the case against what they're doing in Gaza? That's my interpretation.
Thank you, Fiona. Sue, I'm going to come to you next for a response, and then I'll come back to you, Dr. Mo. Are we seeing this? Is this kind of widespread in Australia for healthcare professionals wanting to speak out?
Absolutely. The suppression of health advocacy in relation to what's happening to the Palestinian people is unprecedented. Those of us who've been campaigning for decades, we've never come across anything like the attempted silencing that's going on in relation to what's happening in Gaza. It's been particularly vicious towards young professionals. Young professionals are vulnerable. They've got their careers ahead. We've had testimony from AMSA, the Australian Medical Students Association, when they were attempting to speaking out about this. Threats were made to their careers, things like, you'll never get a job in my hospital unless you keep quiet about this. That was the implication. There's been cancellation of events, as Fiona has talked about. There have been reports, string of vexatious reports to AHPRA, the Australian Health Professionals Regulation Agency, in relation to people speaking out. There hasn't been very strong action from the regulator in relation to these vexatious notifiers. In particular, I want to say our leading health organisations, representative bodies, I could name the AMA, most of the medical colleges, the RACGP, the College of GPs, other medical colleges have either been fairly silent or they've been very weak on this. They've been very timid about saying anything that will name and shame the perpetrator of what is happening, namely the Israeli government and IDF. It's been quite shameful, and there's much more we could say about that.
And if I could just add there, Sue and I have just recently written to colleges, and the kind of response is very generic. It's not specifically saying we accept that this is a disaster that's happening, this is genocide, it's damaging to children. It's very generic and vague that, of course we support children in war situations, or, it's not actually saying we acknowledge what you're saying is the truth. And it's that the lack of response of the medical associations is scary. And I believe that many of the universities are also being threatened if they come out and speak. Where is our humanity here? This is now, you cannot deny these statistics and what is happening in Gaza, and yet somehow there's a group that's obviously frightening these organisations to silence us. And I find that, I'm not anti-Semitic. I mean, the interesting thing is most of my Jewish doctor friends are absolutely on the same page with us. There is obviously a very powerful group of extreme people who are trying to silence this issue.
Dr. Mo, I want to come back to you next before we play the video from you as well. Obviously, this event was cancelled, but you have been an incredibly powerful advocate for Palestinians and for your fellow healthcare colleagues. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience after coming home and trying to speak out on these issues?
It's very, very difficult to be an advocate. As you know, the silencing of healthcare workers is very evident from those cancelled speaking conferences. But it's not just that. It's nobody has ever given you a manual on how do you advocate for your people during a genocide? How do you advocate for your colleagues during a genocide? I was just a young junior doctor in Perth, and I went to Gaza and I came back, and obviously I had the world's attention, and it's hard to be so controlled and measured sometimes in interviews, to be able to give the truth in a way that is palpable to people who are so emotionally charged by this topic, being able to convey the humanity of Palestinian people, while at the same time you're sitting in front of people that have denied your humanity for generations. Trying to be an advocate in that space is very, very difficult. And, even as an advocate, you don't always get it right. But I think one thing that I've always tried to focus and be consistent on is knowing how dire the situation is, that we need courage. That's what we need as healthcare professionals. We need to be brave. This is not a job, it's a vocation. This is a calling when you're a doctor. It's a privilege to be a doctor. And that's what I've always believed ever since I was a kid, that being a doctor is a privilege. And with it comes a responsibility. And that responsibility is you have to advocate for your patients. That responsibility is when you witness such crimes, that you have to speak up no matter the cost, even at such personal costs. And, you know, I've experienced a lot of those. But it's not about me. And I know these questions are sometimes, you know, they're about the advocacy work and they're related around me, but it's not about me. It is about the people of Gaza. And that's what I try and focus and center it off. No matter what happens to me, I'm safe. I'm in a home. I've got food on the table. But it is about Gaza. And I always try and circle it back to the people in Gaza. That's who we need to advocate for. They are facing an extinction level event. And we as a healthcare community have been silenced. And the reason we have been silenced is because we are so powerful. When a doctor speaks, people listen. When a nurse speaks, people listen. And, you know, when the two professors that you have on with me, that I feel so small compared to them, you know, for all the things, amazing things they've done. But when you have people like that talking, people sit down and they listen. And that is why they try and silence the voices of healthcare professionals. And that is why they are targeting healthcare professionals in Gaza, because they are healers and they are leaders in their community. And we as doctors and nurses are healers and leaders in our community. And that is why they want to silence us. And that is why the more they silence us, the braver we have to be and the stronger that we have to be.
Can I just come in there? So you have to understand that one of the reasons why you are so powerful is because you are so generous and you are so calm and so kind. I noticed that when all of the responses to the emails that you were sent from the Fiona Stanley Hospital, you acquiesced to you acquiesced to all of their requests. You were prepared to go for the most pathetic presentation that they had truncated you for. You went along with that. So I think you're a model of somebody who is an advocate, because you are you're not angry, you're just very calm and you've got all of the information at your fingertips and you speak with such humanity. That's why you are so effective. So you're much more effective than these two old professors here who are trying hard to support you as much as possible. And I just think you're one of the most important heroes in Australia at the moment.
Well, thank you for saying that, Professor Fiona Stanley. And I've got a video here to play here from Dr. Mo during his time in Gaza. Hopefully I can make this work. After that, we're going to take some questions from the audience. I apologize. We're not going to be able to get to all of them. There is a lot, but I figured people were here to hear from Dr. Mo, Sue and Fiona about what's happening in Gaza specifically. So I've tried to give it a little bit more time to that. Here we go. Hopefully it works.
Yeah, Sean, good evening. Breaking news tonight out of the Middle East. Israeli fighter jets are currently striking the Gaza Strip. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is over.
18th of March, Gaza. A fragile ceasefire hung over us like a thin sheet of glass. We knew it could shatter. We just didn't know when. That evening, I was reflecting on the rooftop.
Just chilling on the roof. We've got 1 hour left before we break our fast. You can probably hear above drones in the air. Now, there is little to no medical equipment. We have very little ventilators. If there is any escalation or we start getting more or mass casualty events, I don't really think that we'll be able to cope. We're already struggling as it is.
The sky was full of drones, but inside, I knew we weren't ready. We were understaffed, under-equipped, and underprepared. If something happened, I knew we would not cope. At 1:30 a.m. it happened.
There is a hell on earth today. Its name is Northern Gaza. Israeli airstrikes have struck Gaza's biggest hospital.
The sky lit up, bombs shook the ground, and the ceasefire was over. Women and children screaming. We've just woken up. The whole place is shaking. There's been bombs that have been going down for about 30 minutes non-stop. There's screams everywhere, and we're going to go down to the emergency department. This is a mass casualty event, and there are going to be a lot of bodies. We ran to the ER, and it had already begun. Within 2 hours, 400 people had already been killed.
He's breathing, he's breathing.
A child, so traumatized, staring at the wall. This image went viral. He had lost his whole family. For 2 hours, he just stared at the wall, rocking back and forth. He was forever changed. We tried to save who we could, treating people on the floor, cutting them open, no sanitary conditions, lack of medical supplies, lack of space, people out on the streets in the morning, bodies everywhere, so many people dead, so many people unaccounted for. The cries were everywhere, exhausted, emotional. I spoke from the heart. I opened my camera and recorded a message to the world. We've worked throughout the entire night. We haven't stopped. I mean, it was just mostly women and children, burnt head to toe, limbs missing, heads missing. This is unbelievable. And the bombing is still going on. The rooms are still shaking. The screams are everywhere. It's insane. I've been there all night and I haven't stopped, and my legs are shaking and I feel dizzy and lightheaded. The smell of burnt flesh is still in my nose. That night in Gaza, it never really ended. It just echoes over and over and over again.
Oh, sorry. I can still hear other videos in the background here. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for sharing that video, Dr. Mo. We're going to now go to questions from the audience, but again, thank you for your time, for bearing witness for the care that you did provide in Gaza, and for bringing home such an important message here to Australia and to the rest of the world. We've got so many questions here from the audience. We're not going to be able to get to them all. I do apologise to everyone, but we'll get to as many as we can. The first question here is from Sally, and there's a couple of people who've touched on this about the impacts on your own mental health, I guess, and what's like now coming back to Australia, Dr. Mo.
I mean, I've not really had much time to think about my own mental health, to be honest with you. I think sometimes, I made a decision, which was, I think when I talk about these things, I want to be quite raw and emotional when I do share it. And sometimes I want to be vulnerable when I share it. And I feel it's important that people see that, because this is a real human impact that it has. It's a real human moment. And if I'm able to convey the magnitude of it through emotional expression, then that's what I have to do. And it's hard sometimes, because you do have to re-traumatize yourself over and over again when you think about things that you did and things that you saw. And I'm kind of using myself as a little bit of a punching bag, emotional punching bag sometimes, to get that message across. But I wish more doctors that went to Gaza would come back and share the load, and more of us can talk about it and really show how difficult it is working in a war zone like that. Nobody should be treating that many children that have been shot in the head and killed like that. So it's going to have an emotional impact on me for sure. But, you know, I look at my wife, you know, who's come out of Gaza, and she's been working in the hospitals for the last 2 years. And I really draw strength from her.
Thanks so much, Dr. Mo. The next question I've got is from Naomi Conway, who asks, what can we in healthcare in Australia do, if anything, to help those in Gaza or those evacuated now or in the future? I'm not sure who wants to tackle that one first.
I mean, I can answer it. Look, we need to hold our healthcare institutions accountable. There are many healthcare institutions that have just signed big money contracts to bring Israeli AI companies to our healthcare system. These Israeli health companies are the same companies that are using AI to kill and target healthcare facilities in Gaza, to target healthcare professionals, our colleagues. And this is not ethical. It's not ethical, it's not moral, and it shouldn't be something in healthcare that we should ever compromise on. And holding our institutions accountable is important, because if we normalize the death and destruction of these Black and brown people thousands of kilometers away, it doesn't bode well for what will happen to us here. And if the ethics of these companies are that they are okay with killing these people in Palestine, what does it mean about our healthcare information, about controlling our health? These are real important questions, not just if you are a supporter of either pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. This is about us as individual freedom and liberties within Australia are being challenged by us supporting these institutions that are aiding and abetting in one of the worst crimes in human history, which is a genocide. And that's why we need to be, as healthcare professionals, vocal and say, not in my name, not in my name, not in our name. We are healthcare professionals. We're here to save lives. We're here to help lives. We are not here to aid and abet the genocide of people.
Sue, did you want to add something to that?
Who's got it on mute?
You're on mute there.
Sorry, beg your pardon. If I could just add to Mo's very, very wonderful summary. And yes, I would agree. Not letting the ethics of this die, because that's what we're at risk of losing sight of the ethics of what is happening to the people of Palestine. We must not let that happen. We must maintain this ethical discourse so that that's where our eyes are. What is the right thing to do? What is the right thing for us as health professionals to do? What is the right thing for our government to be doing in this situation? If we belong to any healthcare organisation which has not spoken out about this and which should be doing so, we need to be putting pressure on them collectively, individually, not let them get away with silence in the face of the most horrific crimes being done against innocent people. And keeping pressure on our government. We all know about our government's complicity, especially in relation to supply of weapons parts, which have helped enable this genocide and other crimes to happen. Keep pressure on our government. Don't let them get away with their lies about what Australia is selling or not selling to Israel. Keeping, I guess, broadening the discussion a bit, pressure on the weapons companies themselves. So Lockheed Martin, they have such a high profile, the weapons industry generally in Australia. Don't let them get away with thinking they've got social license for aiding a genocide in Israel.
If I can just add to that, the other reason I think it's really powerful, and I don't know what, I'm sure Dr. Mo can comment on this better than I, but the silence from countries like Australia, how do Palestinians feel about that? How do our Palestinian workforce, the medical workforce, feel that we're not able to speak out and support them and say, this is appalling, we are with you, we support you? That to me is another trauma for them, that they are being so undervalued and ignored by the world. If you try and say anything, you're accused of being anti-Semitic. And what, you know, to me, these kids are dying because of our silence in a way. And the other point I just wanted to make is what a failure this war has been to achieve what even Israel wanted it to achieve. It hasn't got rid of Hamas and it didn't get back the hostages. It wasn't a war, actually, because basically hardly anyone in Palestine's got any capacity to fight back. So to me, it's been an absolute failure. Give me an example of any war which has succeeded in achieving an outcome that's of benefit to anybody. And in terms of the arms companies, Sue, what we're up against is an extreme capitalist world that makes money. They don't care a fig about what the damage they're doing. All they want to do is make money. All the arms companies are going to love all these wars that are happening around the globe because their bottom line is giving the shareholders profits. That's how the world works. But that's another whole webinar we need to have, Ebony, about the extreme capitalism and how it's destroying our societies. But to me, I don't know how I'm going to lobby Lockheed, but it's about shaming people, I guess. But I think I'm with you all the way, Sue, but I can see that it's really, really a difficult one for us. And the urgency now is to try and support the people in Gaza to reconstruct their lives. And that's the public health approach we now need urgently if this ceasefire is maintained in future. We've got a huge task. And the more we can collectively, Australia should be playing a major role here. Surely it'll be doing this. Surely it won't be anti-Semitic to go in and help now rebuild Gaza and to actually put these public health instruments in place to get the water, the sanitation, the food, the vaccinations, the childcare, the support for these traumatized families. Surely that's something that will make us feel good.
I think also adding on to, because you've pretty much nailed a lot of it there. We also need to think about the political public health of this country as well. We are seeing far-right marches all up and down the country. We are seeing mass anti-immigration marches up and down the country. Islamophobia is so normalized on mainstream media. And I think what's happened now is because of, our capitalist society where the bottom line matters more than international law, it matters more than politics. I think what needs to happen is we need to have a redefinition of all of these things, and we need to be honest about these things. These institutions are not designed in our benefit. The money in politics is destroying our political system. It's destroying our ability to actually have any real change with any party that comes in, because they are controlled and governed by these major corporations who only care about the bottom line. And today it's Palestine, but tomorrow it's the working class of Australia, which it already is. Tomorrow it's the middle class of Australia. Next week it's the upper class. Before you know it, all of us are going to be affected by this. And I think people need to understand that just because it's happening to Black and brown and Arab and Muslim babies today doesn't mean that it won't be happening to us in the future, because the precedent that's been set by this war is that might is right and money oversees everything. So, these are the things that we have to bear in mind.
But it is happening now. Look at the disaster of privatised childcare, which we predicted back in 2015 when they started defunding the community-controlled childcare. Yes. Look what's happened. We didn't predict the child sexual abuse, but we predicted that if you're privatising these essential welfare services, they will cut corners and damage will be done. And that's, if you're only just serving your shareholders, you're not serving any of these welfare services that depend on really good services with high quality staff that have been privatised. I mean, childcare, aged care, prisons, out-of-home care is a disaster for the nation. Sorry, I'm going really off track.
No,
that's okay.
Absolutely on the money here.
When we talk about
driving
Australia
all these
first,
negative things.
Yeah,
Sorry.
when we talk about Australia first, it has to mean Australia first, but it has to mean Australia first for the truth of why it should be Australia first, which is, Australia isn't multi-billion-dollar corporations and defense pacts with countries that have fascist tendencies. Australia
Yeah.
first means looking after our neighbours. It means looking after the
Absolutely.
children of our country. It means making sure everyone's safe. Everyone has equal access to healthcare, equal access to education. That first-time home buyers have access to be on the property ladder and buy a home and live out the Australian dream. That's what Australia first means. It doesn't mean that we kick out black and brown people and people of other religions. That's not Australia first. And
No.
this is what we need to redefine. And Palestine and these pro-Palestine marches that have been happening up and down the country have been a litmus test and a calling cry for everybody to come back to what is important. And it really is, this Palestine movement is redefining what we can and can't talk about, our censorship laws, and it is defining now a whole generation of radicalism. And radicalism when it comes to protesting, when it comes to different government movements. You're seeing this all over the world. The rise of One Nation, the rise of the Greens in this country. You're seeing the rise of Reform in the UK, the rise of MAGA in America. All of these things are interconnected and interlinked. And when you have this isolation policy, the world doesn't work like that anymore. You know, you have a plate of breakfast today and see how many different countries were involved in those avocados that you're eating. So the world is interconnected, whether people like it or not. And Australia first means looking after each other. It doesn't mean throwing each other under the bus to look after a certain cohort of people. And that is what the Palestine movement is about. It's about treating everybody and everybody having equal rights to dignity and healthcare.
Dr. Mo, we're out of time, but I want to bring the focus back to the people of Gaza. If there's a message that you want everyone who's watching today to take home with them, what would that be?
So I think the message is look, this movement or what's happened in Gaza has dehumanized us all. You know, the fact that we can now scroll past looking at dead children because we don't want to anymore, that's a part of our humanity that has died. But for that death also comes life with it. And what we have done as a pro-Palestine movement around the world, and especially liberal people and people advocating for human rights, it has made us more organized than ever before. It has made us more powerful than ever before in the way that we talk, in boycott movements, in civil movements like the Freedom Flotillas that sail to Gaza. And I think that is something that we can all thank the people of Gaza for and their resilience. They have taught us through their suffering what it is to be humanitarians and what it is to fight for justice. By watching their resilience, we've become more resilient. And I think it's not a pity cry that I want to leave for people. It's a message of hope. And that is hope is that the resistance of the people of Gaza has freed us all. Their injustices has made us seek justice more so than ever. And just briefly, I want to say that, you know, PCRF, Palestinian Children Relief Fund Australia, has just launched here in Australia, and they will be doing the utmost work to evacuate children out of Gaza, to rebuild existing infrastructures in Gaza. So please, if you have a moment, check out their website, donate to PCRF, and I think together, all of us, we can make a change. And remember, it's always the people that rise up first and make the change. It's not the governments, and the people of Gaza have inspired us all.
And I think we've definitely seen that inspiration carry over with the numbers that turned out for the pro-Palestinian rallies across the country here. I want to thank you all for your time today, but particularly you, Dr. Mo. I know it can't be very easy to relive and share all those experiences, but it's been incredibly valuable, and we're really glad that we were able to give so many people access to that information that you've brought from Gaza today. I want to thank everyone who's joined us on the webinar today. We appreciate your interest. We'll try and include some of those links that Dr. Mo, Fiona and Sue have mentioned today underneath this video on YouTube so people can find it.
And Fiona and Sue, you're absolutely amazing. Fiona and Sue, they're absolutely amazing. Honestly, it's so amazing. And one thing I want to say is the women in this movement have been the cornerstone of the pro-Palestine movement. It's been women all over the world that have led this. And obviously with my wife here, I'm so inspired by the bravery of all these women that have done so much for the Palestinian cause. And that's exemplified by Sue and Fiona. And I really thank you from the bottom of the heart of all the solidarity that you guys have shown.
Dr. Mo, right back at you, and more. You're the one who's been on the ground, and I can't pay respect highly enough for that.
Well, we'll do everything we can to help this and make this more public. You've inspired me to redouble my efforts today from what you've said. And I just want to thank the Australia Institute. You're a most extraordinary organisation. I keep on saying to Richard Dennis, if I, again, 40 years younger and lived in Canberra, and if Canberra was near the beach, I'd apply for a job in the Australia Institute. I think you're extraordinary. And we do need to, Dr. Mo, I just have to say to you, the vast majority of people are not marching in those horrible rallies. The vast majority of people are really much more humane, and that's what we've got to tap into, and to give that evidence that really the humane way and the caring way is the way forward.
100%.
Well,
Thank you, Australian
again.
Institute.
It's the very least that we can do. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed, Mustafa, Professor Fiona, Stanley, and Dr. Sue Wareham for your time today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. You can find all of our other webinars upcoming on our website, as well as the recording from today's event to share with other people. And perhaps we might try and get these guys back in a few months for a bit of an update, given the huge amount of interest that we've had today. Thank you all. We'll talk to you again soon, and take care of yourselves.
Thank you so much, Ebony.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to keep up to date with all our latest research and work, sign up to our newsletter. Delivered every fortnight, it includes behind-the-scenes updates from Richard Dennis, an exclusive cartoon from Judy Horacek, details for our upcoming events and webinars, as well as explainers, graphs, and not to mention the latest cutting-edge research and analysis from the team here on the key issues that are facing Australia. Click the button on your screen to check it out.